Imagine stumbling across a trailer online that feels different. Not different in the way most films try to be, with flashy cuts or chilling sound design. No, this one feels wrong, like a piece of film that slipped through the cracks of reality itself. The title was simple: Thamma Official Teaser Announcement. No studio watermark, no production credits, no familiar logos. Just a plain black thumbnail with a single word written in faded crimson: Thamma. The first people who saw it claimed it was uploaded late at night without any promotion, on a channel that had 0 subscribers. And yet, within hours, it began spreading. Not because it was advertised, but because anyone who watched it couldn't stop talking about it. The teaser was only 60 seconds long, but those 60 seconds left scars on the mind. It begins in silence. No music, no introduction, just a slow pan across what looks like an abandoned theater. Rows of red velvet seats torn open and spilling white stuffing like entrails. A projector screen hangs, stained and warped. The camera moves forward slowly, shakily, almost as if held by trembling hands. At the 15-second mark, a sound begins. A low, guttural hum. Not music, not quite mechanical, more like dozens of voices humming at once, each slightly out of sync. Then, at the 20-second mark, you see her. At first, it looks like a woman sitting in the middle row. Her back is to the camera. Long black hair cascades down her shoulders, her head tilted unnaturally to one side. The humming grows louder. At 25 seconds, her head turns, but not fully, just enough for the viewer to see the pale skin of her cheek, stretched too thin, as if her face is barely clinging to bone. At 30 seconds, a single word flashes across the screen: TAMA, and then the camera cuts to black. But the final 20 seconds, that's where people say the real horror begins. Because according to every account, what happens next is never the same. Some viewers reported seeing quick flashes of faces they recognized, friends, family members, even themselves, screaming in distorted silence. Others claimed they heard whispers in a language they didn't understand. A few swore they saw footage that had no business being there. Grainy clips of missing person reports, morgue photographs, even CCTV footage of crimes that had never been solved. And then at exactly the 1-minute mark, the trailer ended with a sound so sharp and so sudden it made people drop their phones or rip their headphones out. A scream. Not the scream of a horror actress, not staged, not fake, but raw, primal terror. The video would then cut off and the screen would return to normal. But here's the most disturbing part. When viewers went back to rewatch it, the teaser was gone, deleted. The channel disappeared as if it had never existed, and yet those who had seen it swore the experience left something behind. Some reported nightmares, always the same, sitting in a dark theater, waiting for something to begin. Others described hearing the hum at night, faintly, just before falling asleep. One man in Mumbai claimed he woke up to find his TV on, the words "THMI's Kamangi" flickering across the static. He smashed his television the next morning. The origins of the trailer remain a mystery. No one could trace the upload. No studio ever claimed responsibility. And yet, the name Thamma began to circulate online forums, whispered like a curse. Cinephiles who dug deeper claimed the name belonged to a film that was never finished. A project from decades ago, abandoned under suspicious circumstances. Supposedly, the footage had been buried, sealed away, lost in a vault that no one was meant to open again. So why, after all these years, did a teaser suddenly appear? And if the trailer was only the beginning, what would happen if the full film was ever released? Because some films are never meant to be seen. And Thamma was one of them. The story of Thamma didn't stay contained to that vanished teaser. No, the whisper spread further, from late-night internet threads to industry insiders, editors, archivists, and projectionists who had once brushed against the cursed project began to speak up reluctantly. What they revealed only deepened the unease. The original film, Thamma, was said to have been conceived in the late 1980s, under a small, obscure studio based in Kolkata. Very little paperwork exists today. What's left are scraps of rumor that it was meant to be a supernatural thriller, shot on grainy 16mm film, funded by a producer no one could ever properly identify. The shoot itself was plagued from the beginning. Equipment failing, film reels getting fogged, actors complaining of strange voices during takes. But the worst was reported in the editing room. One editor, now an old man who rarely speaks of the past, gave a chilling interview decades later. His voice, cracked with age, trembled as he remembered. He said, "The film did not want to be cut. Every time I spliced the reel, frames appeared that were not there before. Faces I didn't recognize. Empty corridors stretching too long. A woman's shadow behind the actors, moving out of rhythm with them. At first I thought I was hallucinating." But the others saw it too. The editor claimed that sometimes, when he worked alone at night, the hum, that same droning chorus heard in the teaser, filled the tiny editing suite. He unplugged all equipment, yet the sound persisted, vibrating in the air, rattling the scissors in his trembling hand. And then came the whispers. Not voices he could understand, but murmurs that seemed to emerge from the film reels themselves. When the magnetic tape spun, it carried not only recorded dialogue but something else, something underneath. He described it as if the film itself was speaking. One assistant editor disappeared after claiming he had translated a few words of the whisper. His notebook was never found, his apartment abandoned. His name never again appeared on any production credit. The surviving fragments of the editing process were scattered. Some reels were destroyed in a fire. Others were stolen or simply went missing. No official cut of Thamma was ever assembled. The studio that funded it folded within a year, its office locked and forgotten. But insiders knew. The film was never destroyed completely. Pieces remained. Reels stored in basements, private collections, even abandoned projection booths. And wherever those reels lay, stories of misfortune followed. A projectionist in Dhaka claimed he found a rusting canister labeled simply tea. He loaded it out of curiosity. The film jammed midway, burning a hole into the frame. Before the image melted away, he swore he saw a woman's face pressed up against the lens, as though she was staring directly back at him. That same night, his wife said he screamed in his sleep, repeating one word, Thamma. Days later, he vanished without trace. The whispers grew louder in the early 2000s when digitalization became common. A collector reportedly converted some reels of Thamma into digital format. But when he reviewed the files, strange corruption plagued every attempt. His computer screen flickered with static, his speakers blasting the low hum until the hardware itself fried. He swore the last image he saw before the system crashed was not part of the footage, but his own reflection on the screen, smiling back at him when he was not smiling. And so, when that Thamma teaser announcement appeared online decades later, editors who once brushed against the project knew exactly what it meant. Someone had pieced together fragments of the forbidden film. Someone had rebuilt enough to produce a teaser. But the bigger question haunted them: why now? Who was behind it? And did they know what they were awakening? One editor, now living in hiding, wrote anonymously in a private forum before vanishing again, "The whispers are not random. They are instructions. The film is incomplete, but it wants to be finished. Every cut, every splice, every frame brings it closer. Whoever released that teaser, they are finishing what we refused to. And when it is finished, she will step out." The post was deleted minutes later, the account erased, but his warning remained etched into the memory of those who read it. The Thamma teaser wasn't just a teaser. It was a signal that someone somewhere was still working on the film, and that the whispers in the editing room had never truly stopped. There is a reason certain reels of Thamma were hidden, locked away in places no archivist wanted to admit existed. They were called the forbidden frames. Film historians use that phrase sparingly. Most lost films are simply incomplete, burned in studio fires, or discarded when they fail commercially. But Thamma was different. The reels that survived were deliberately buried, not because of copyright, not because of legal disputes, but because anyone who looked at them too long began to change. The first whispers about the forbidden frames surfaced in the late 1990s. A retired archivist in Pune confessed on his deathbed that he had once possessed a reel labeled Scene 47. He said the canister looked ordinary, dusty, forgotten. But the moment he lifted the lid, he felt a heaviness in the air, as if the room itself was holding its breath. The footage inside was incomplete, spliced crudely, flickering between images. But the archivist described a sequence so disturbing that even decades later, his voice cracked as he recalled it. It showed a room, not a set, not a studio location, a real place. Bare walls peeling paint, a single chair bolted to the center, and a woman. Not an actress, not someone playing a role. This woman's eyes darted around as if she was aware of the camera. She struggled against ropes that bound her arms, her lips moving soundlessly. The reel had no recorded dialogue, but the archivist swore he could hear her words in his head, pleading, begging, screaming without sound. And then, frame by frame, something began to happen to her face. Her jaw dislocated first, stretching far too wide. Then her eyes rolled upward, not in pain, but in obedience, as if something unseen commanded her body. The hum began faintly in the background, growing louder with each cut, each splice, until it wasn't just sound but vibration inside the skull. The sequence ended with a single flash frame, one that should have been impossible. A black and white photograph of a morgue drawer, tagged with a name. The archivist would not say what name he saw. He only said this: "It was not hers. It was mine." He destroyed the reel the next morning, burning it in his courtyard. His neighbors reported a foul stench lingering for days, like rotting flesh. Other stories followed. A young student in Chennai, digging through auctioned film reels, claimed to have found a fragment labeled Thamma, Cut 3. He invited friends to view it in his hostel. Only 2 minutes into the projection, the lights in the room flickered, the bulb in the projector burst, and one of his friends collapsed, seizing violently. When he regained consciousness, he whispered one word over and over, again, again, again. He was institutionalized shortly after. The reel disappeared from evidence. As more fragments leaked into private hands, rumors solidified into something darker. The forbidden frames were not fictional. They were not stage. They were records. Records of what happened to the cast. Some insisted the actors of Thamma never left the set, that the film turned on them, consuming their performances until only pieces of them remained. Images, screams, distorted faces imprinted onto celluloid. Every attempt to project those fragments became an act of summoning, forcing the lost to relive their torment again and again. And then came the most unsettling discovery of all. A collector in London who specialized in banned cinema purchased what he believed to be a mislabeled Bengali art film. When he threaded it into his machine, he realized he had obtained a Thamma fragment. Only 30 seconds long, it showed nothing more than a corridor. But the corridor never ended. The camera moved forward, endlessly, until the walls began to curve inward, as though the space itself was collapsing. At the far distance, a silhouette stood waiting. A woman, hair covering her face. When the film jammed and burned, the collector froze. Because the silhouette was still there, not on the screen, not in the reel, but in the reflection of the projector's glass, standing behind him. He never touched film again. These were the forbidden frames. Pieces of a film that was never finished, yet somehow never died. Every archivist who handled them, every collector who possessed them, every viewer who watched them, left behind stories of terror, madness, disappearance. So when the Thamma teaser announcement appeared in the modern age, experts knew what it meant. Those frames had not only survived, they had been used. And if fragments alone could infect the mind, corrupt machinery, and twist reality, what would happen when someone put them all together again? What would the complete film become? What would it summon? Because the forbidden frames were not simply cursed, they were a doorway. And with every reappearance, that doorway opened just a little wider. For years, Thamma remained a whispered legend in the undercurrents of film culture. A lost project, a cursed reel, a rumor that bled into urban myth. But then came the night that turned whispers into screams. The Thamma teaser had already made its strange appearance online, vanishing just as quickly. Yet, weeks later, a private announcement circulated within select circles of cinephiles and journalists. An exclusive midnight screening of Thamma was scheduled in a small, defunct theater on the outskirts of Kolkata. No studio logos, no press kits, just a plain envelope mailed anonymously to critics, collectors, and underground horror enthusiasts. Inside, a ticket stub printed with nothing but a time, a date, and a single phrase. SE-Mu-Is-Never-Armantio BCN. The theater itself was a relic from another era. Its nameplate had rusted beyond recognition, its glass doors streaked with grime. But when the chosen few arrived that night, they found it inexplicably open. The lobby smelled of damp plaster and mold. Old posters clung to the walls, their colors drained, their actors' faces peeling away. Inside, the auditorium was cold. Not the kind of cold from faulty air conditioning, but a biting, unnatural chill that settled into bones. Rows of moth-eaten velvet seats creaked under the weight of fewer than 40 attendees. No one greeted them. No ushers, no staff. The projector booth glowed faintly at the back, but no operator could be seen. And then, without warning, the house lights dimmed. The hum began. The reel flickered to life. At first, it was the teaser again. The abandoned theater, the woman in the seat, the head tilting unnaturally. Familiar to those who had seen it online, terrifyingly new to those who hadn't. But when the 30-second title card appeared, TMA, the footage didn't end. It kept going. The first scene showed a family gathered around a dinner table, though the actors' faces were blurred as if the camera refused to capture them clearly. Their mouths moved in slow, deliberate motions, but no dialogue came through. Instead, the hum deepened, layered now with faint whispers. The camera panned across the table, slowing each time it passed the mother's chair. Her face was hidden by hair, but her hands twitched unnaturally, fingers jerking an insect like spasms. Suddenly, the film cut. Now the audience was inside a bedroom, a child's bedroom. Toys scattered across the floor, a half-open wardrobe looming in the corner. The camera lingered on the bed, where a small figure lay under the covers, breathing shallowly, trembling. The wardrobe door creaked. The audience leaned forward, breath held. The projector whirred violently, and from the dark wardrobe, a pale hand emerged, slowly, impossibly long fingers curling around the wooden edge. Then, cut. Gas rippled through the theater. Some swore they had seen more in those split seconds. That the hand was not reaching for the child. That it was reaching for them. The film continued. Faces appeared, flashing too quickly to register. Some members of the audience cried out, insisting they saw their own reflections among the montage. Distorted, bloodied, screaming silently. One critic ran to the aisle, trying to leave, but the theater doors would not budge. He beat against them until his fists bled, then froze as the projector flickered and the sound of his pounding continued, for the film was showing him. Every desperate blow, every scream. But on screen, his face was already torn open, his eyes wide in death. The real man collapsed. The rest of the audience sat in horrified silence. The climax of the screening came without build-up. No music, no warning, just a sharp cut to a single unbroken shot. The camera returned to the theater, the same one they were sitting in. The same rows, the same torn velvet seats. But this time, every seat was full. Not with the audience present, but with figures. Pale, rigid, headless shadows. Sitting in silence, staring forward. The whispers grew louder. Some attendees clutched their ears. Others vomited onto the sticky floor. And then on the screen, in the very center of that crowded theater, sat the woman. Her head tilted, her hair spilling forward. She raised her face for the first time. Those who saw it said it wasn't a face at all. Just a void, a hollow absence, sucking all light into itself. The reel snapped. The film burned. The screen went dark. When police arrived the next morning, the theater was silent. Every seat was empty, except one. In the middle row where the woman had been sitting in the film, a single attendee remained, eyes wide open, body stiff, his jaw unhinged, dislocated far too wide. The rest of the audience, gone, vanished without trace. That night came to be known among archivists as the premiere that never was. No official records exist, no names published. But whispers persisted of survivors who refused to speak, and of reels that once again slipped into private hands. For those who know, that premiere wasn't just a screening, it was a ritual. And Thamma had finally found her stage. The night of the so-called premiere should have ended with headlines splashed across every major paper. Dozens of attendees gone without a trace, a dead man locked in Reger with his jaw split unnaturally wide. But the event barely surfaced. No news reports, no police statements and missing persons lists. It was as if the audience had never existed. But survivors whispered otherwise. One critic, who never spoke publicly but confided in a close colleague before vanishing himself, described what really happened when the lights came back on after the reel snapped. He said the theater wasn't empty. He said the audience hadn't vanished, they were still there. Every seat full, only they weren't alive anymore. According to his testimony, their bodies remained seated, staring blankly at the screen that now showed nothing but flickering static. But their shadows on the floor didn't match their stillness. The shadows moved. They twisted, writhed, bending at unnatural angles. Some rose from the floor, standing on their own, stretching across the aisles. And then the shadows looked back, not at the screen, not at each other. At him, he said he tried to run, but his legs refused to obey. The air grew heavy, pressing down on his chest. The hum returned, vibrating inside his skull. The shadows began to peel themselves away from the bodies rising tall, faceless yet watching. That was the last thing he remembered before blacking out. When he awoke, he was outside the theater, slumped against a wall in the pouring rain. His ticket stub was clutched in his hand, damp but intact. The theater behind him stood abandoned again, its doors locked and chained as though it hadn't been opened in decades. Inside, no trace of the others remained. More fragments surfaced from supposed witnesses, each adding a thread to the horror. One claimed the film didn't actually end. After the burn and snap of the reel, something else began to play, images projected not from the machine but from the dark itself. Walls pulsed faintly, like living skin. The screen became a window, opening into corridors that stretched infinitely. Figures walked those halls faceless, heads tilted, searching for seats. Another swore that as he ran for the exits, he looked back and saw himself still sitting in the audience, unmoving, his shadow shifting independently. And others simply disappeared. Archivists piecing together the event began to whisper a phrase. The audience that didn't leave. Because whether or not those people ever made it out physically, part of them stayed behind, trapped in the reel, or worse, inside the theater itself. Months later, strange reports began to surface in Kolkata. Passers-by near the abandoned building swore they saw faint light flickering through its broken windows at night. Sometimes, if you pressed your ear to the door, you could hear it, the dull, low hum of a projector running. And if you dared to look through the cracks, you'd see them. Rows of pale figures still seated, their jaws stretched wide in silence, waiting. But the most terrifying accounts came from those who didn't even visit the theater. Viewers who had watched the leaked teaser online, even for just a few seconds, began to dream of sitting in that audience. Always the same seat, always the same hum, always the same feeling that something was breathing on the back of their necks. One forum user posted desperately, "I keep waking up in the same place. A theater that smells of mold. The seats are full, but when I turn to look, no one has faces. Last night, I saw someone familiar. It was me. I was already sitting there." The post was deleted within an hour. His account never logged in again. The legend spread like infection. Once you saw the teaser, you were already part of the audience. Even if you never set foot in Kolkata, even if you never saw